Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to our program today, where we continue our Superpower series. Today is topic number 5, the Yoga of the Tongue. With a speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 11 members on Zoom and more than a dozen members on Facebook. People are still dialing in. And good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thanks a lot, JM. Great to be back here. And yoga of the tongue, what's that all about? That sounds bizarre. We're going to find out today a little bit more about it. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to give a special shout out to my dear friend, Rick Gilbert, who's joined us today. Thanks, Rick, for coming on. Great to see you. And everybody else who's jumping on today, Lige, Debelina, thanks for coming. Teresa, Maurice Sila, Pratibha, Sanjit, and lots more coming on. So it's a respite in the day when we have an opportunity, as usual, when we start the show, to take a moment for introspection. And it's something so available to us to use our discretion where we point our attention, bringing it inwardly, that sometimes it could be missed as an opportunity to get centered. So I'm going to switch over to the original sound for musicians on Zoom, and I'm going to put on just a little bit of meditative sound vibration. And then anybody who wants to participate, we'll just take 2 or 3 minutes just to start off as more people are joining to get a little centered. Does that sound okay? I need at least 3 thumbs up. It's legal in Canada to use emojis to sign a contract. Okay, thank you very much. So take a minute, and if you're up to it, sit a little straighter than you were a second ago. It just brings the mind to attention, and then relax and try closing your eyes just for a minute. And here comes your Zen-like music. It's actually a treat to take time for ourselves and realize that we don't have to become something, we already are something. In fact, the word to be means the verb itself, which is conjugated in various ways, means that which remains. And when we take away the external dealings that we're usually involved with, maybe fretting over, at least contemplating, even when we sleep, then there's a sense that we exist. And in our very own existence, in our own conscious awareness, there's a sense of satisfaction. There's nowhere we have to go. We don't have to become something else. We already are something that's amazing, and that's a conscious entity. So take a minute just to bring your attention very deliberately to your breath. It's an exercise in realizing that we have the power to point our attention any direction, and where attention goes, energy flows. And just relax, but keep an alert mind and watch your breath for a moment. And just try to notice an even number of seconds as you exhale, and maybe count to 2 or 3 as you exhale in your mind, and inhale with the same number. And just come into focus on your breathing. Let any thought energy float away, like the clouds. You just come and go, but you're there observing. And breathe and relax. And notice that you're watching your breath. and just be in that present awareness. And then take a moment to notice any subtle energy of speech. Speech starts as a thought. It rises up to the voice box, and we manifest that thought through syllables, syntax, words, sentences. What's in our mind then gets transferred to someone else, maybe to ourselves or someone else. It may confirm something, it may be a falsehood, whatever it may be, it becomes manifest through our voice box. And just notice, there may be so many things that you can say. And they're all swirling around, thoughts. And just be aware of the fact that you have the power to speak them or to withhold them. The version of many of the wisdom literatures is that we're creating our own environment, the way we think and then the way we speak starts to create our outward reality that we interact with. And just be aware that there may be an urge to say something, or remember a time right now when there was something to say and then you said it and then you wished you didn't say it. Or think of a time when you thought a noble thought, something that was maybe encouraging to someone else, and then you took the time to say it and it made all the difference. Today we're going to be talking about the superpower of our tongue and speech and how we can direct it in such a way to improve our lives. And bring your awareness back to your breath. Just feel a little gratitude that you can breathe. You can take it for granted, or you can appreciate every time you have the opportunity to inhale and exhale. Maybe wiggle your fingers and toes, open your eyes, and we'll come back into the Zoom room. Welcome everybody who's joined from various places. Some of you are in office, some of you are at home, some of you are in different states. That's how we're all together here. And I deeply appreciate you joining. So now let's take a look. JM, was that okay for everybody? Taking a moment? Can't hurt, right? No injury in introspection, and it's free. It's amazing that we can feel wealthy, actually, if we feel satisfied within. Let's take a look, JM, at the first slide and enter into the topic. And then as we move forward, I'll take some time for some reflections. Reflections are simple, just means anything you hear, any principles that strike you in a way that, well, maybe I could use that. Maybe I could put that one in my pocket and pull it out from time to time and use it. Or if you have questions that you think will expand the conversation in a useful way, we'll stop at intervals. So the tongue. Just notice you have a tongue. If you ever bite your tongue, you really notice how delicate it is. And we can think for a minute how amazing it is. One of the ancient wisdom literatures named the Chaitanya Bhagavat goes through a long list. The speaker is talking about how many species have tongues. And we see quite a few. We see a few here, birds mostly. There's a lizard. Does a mongoose have a tongue? Yes? JM, mongooses have tongues. Any others? Can put it in the chat. Just name 5 animals that aren't on this list that have a tongue. Elephants have tongues. Must be a big one. Okay, what else? Come on, everybody, work with me here. Rabbits have tongues. 3 more you owe me. A cow has tongue. Okay, now it's really pouring in. Giraffe, horse, hippo, lizard, ostrich, dog, snakes. Yeah. So many species have tongues. But one of the distinguishing factors of the human tongue, even Coco the gorilla had vocabulary, lots of it, but didn't have syntax. Coco could say, want, banana, 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 but couldn't say, if you had had bananas yesterday, I would have taken them then, but today I don't feel like taking a banana because I don't feel well today. Even the primates who are seemingly so close to humans and so forth, they don't have the power to put together sentences that express past, present, future, and so forth. What to speak of other subtleties, poetical subtleties that we take for granted, perhaps, as humans, the aesthetics of speech. So we see there's a way of appreciating the tongue, as we'll see that, and as the wisdom literature, the Chaitanya Bhagavat says, so many life forms have tongues, but they can't put together sentences. But if you're human and you're on this show today, you can feel grateful that you have a tongue. Everyone feel happy now? Happier-ish? Okay, so yoga wisdom. If one can control the tongue, it's possible for one to control all the other senses. So there's a way in which this becomes a beginning point. In fact, there's a famous verse in Sanskrit from the Padma Purana, in ancient wisdom literature, that says, Atashi Krishnamadi nabhaved grayamindriye sevamukhi jivado swayameva sparatyada. That jihwa means the tongue in Sanskrit, and adao means the beginning. So it says the beginning of yoga practice is the tongue. And if you can control the tongue, it's possible to control all the other senses. So our proposition today is in the next slide, which says that if you concentrate on controlling the tongue, you can change your life instantly by restraining the tongue and redirecting it to higher topics. Agree or disagree? Just need at least 3 thumbs up to continue. Okay. Only have 2. 2 that I can see. 1 more. Okay, it's a democracy. So in that regard, I like to say the tongue is the gateway sense. Maybe you've heard of gateway drugs. I used to hear it about a lot in the 60s when there were a campaign against various kinds of drugs, and people would say, that's a gateway drug. What does that mean? Does anybody remember what a gateway drug is? I'm the oldest one on the show here. What's a gateway drug?
Vicky, go ahead.
Is it a slippery slope which leads to something worse?
Yeah, that's the implication. It's generally pejorative. And it's the idea that if you start with that, it's going to lead to harder things. At least that was the mantra back in the 60s. If you take this, then next thing you know, you're going to be in a gutter somewhere with an overdose of some illegal drug. This is the context of a gateway drug. So I like to think of the tongue as the gateway sense. It's the sense that leads to all the other senses. And in the wisdom literatures, there's this description of the categories of senses that we have. Some of them are called the knowledge gathering senses. Gyanendriya, the word gyan is cognate in English with the word know. That's why know is spelled so interestingly. K-N-O-W spells know. It comes from gyan in Sanskrit. It means to know something, so that we have senses that are meant to gather information. And then we have karmendriyas. Indriya means senses, and karma means work, means to do some practical thing. So the working senses, what do you think those are? Just show one on the screen. Okay, thanks, JM. Hands, feet. Working senses. How about knowledge gathering senses? Yeah, they're all gathered mostly up here. Vision, hearing, you have smell, taste, there's tactile sense. We gather information from our environment. So very distinctly mentioned is the fact that the tongue is the gateway sense. I already mentioned that the wisdom literatures say if you can make your tongue compliant, or your friend, or you're able to control the tongue, then all the other senses will fall in line. And it's the main process for elevating one's consciousness, is to concentrate on using the tongue in a proper way. So in that way, it's a gateway sense. And another metaphor for the tongue is that it's a rudder. When I was a kid, my father used to take us out to Lake Merritt, and he built his own boat. It was called an El Toro. Built it in our garage, and then he'd take us out to sail, sometimes on weekends, my brother and I. And we learned what a rudder was. He taught us one day, he said, if you take the rudder out, then the boat just goes whichever way it wants to go. So if you look at a rudder and then you look at your tongue, you don't have to do it right now, but take a look in the mirror. Your tongue looks rather rudder-like, doesn't it? Yeah, the tongue looks kind of like a rudder. And if you think of this metaphor, the direction you're going to go, at least this is the theory. This is what the wisdom literature is saying. Your tongue is your rudder. And the way you utilize your tongue is going to determine which way you go. Trying to convince you of the efficacy of controlling the tongue first. So the next idea that comes up, and this is something that is related to science and sound vibration itself. And this is how our words create our world. I mentioned it too when we did a little introspection. The kind of words that we speak will influence us when we hear what we say, and definitely influence other people. And interestingly, the way that we manifest things is through our speech. Let's remember the pandemic. Does anybody remember when we had a pandemic? Think back. Think hard. Okay, you remember. There's a way that during the pandemic, I noticed this, that nobody met except through Zoom. I mean, I'm sure there were a few other mediums, but Zoom was the meeting place of choice, right? Thanks, Jesse. Pandemic, what's that? And notice that a lot of things got done. In fact, in one of the projects I was working with, we had the largest spike in the history of our marketing company that I was working with at that time. And we couldn't go anywhere. All we could do was talk. We'd get together and talk. And Corporations all over the world did the similar thing. In fact, that's all we ever do. This is my proposition right now. When we want to create, we start by, of course, thinking. The creative process comes from within. An idea comes, maybe you're walking and a poem comes to your mind or an idea, and then you'll express it through speech or writing. And writing is simply speech abstracted. You take your speech, you abstract it by putting it into writing so it can be reconstituted later. Nonetheless, say if you want to build a house, how do you do it? Well, you have to talk about it. You get the idea, you have a mind, in your mind's eye, you see a particular kind of house and where you want it, and then you would bring it up. And once you start talking about it, consider that all the ingredients are already here on the earth. They're already available, but you manifest them or you bring them together by your speech. Because, well, let's say, what kind of ingredients would you say you need for a house? Name the 3 top ingredients to build a house. Just put them in the chat. Let's see if anybody knows how to build a house here. We have a lot of engineers on. Okay, sand, wood, and money. Okay, I'll take those 3. Sand, wood, and money. And so where would you get sand? Well, who knows? But you'd bring it up and you say, hey, do you have any sand? And then somebody said, no, but I know somebody who has sand. And there the chain reaction starts because of your speech. Where's the money? Well, I don't know, but I know somebody has some money and would loan it to you if you give him back a decent rate of return, right? And wood, okay, yeah, there's places we can look and find wood. Whatever ingredients are there in the house, sand, wood, and money to buy more ingredients, you're going to talk about it. And I'm making this proposition that you're building it. You're starting to build it. It all starts from subtle and then it becomes grossified. It starts to manifest at a more gross level. But the speech comes from the subtle level. You think of it and you say it out loud. And then there's a way in which the chain reaction starts where the ingredients start to come together because of your speech. So if you trace back anything, do a little reverse engineering, and you'll notice that anything you have in your life was talked about first.
There is a question on chat.
Yeah, there's a question. Let's go to some questions and reflections.
OM is asking, isn't it the mind that controls the tongue? If we can control our mind thoughts, wouldn't the tongue be controlled?
Yes, that's true. But look at it this way. Can I call you Om, or is it initials for? Because Om's a nice name too. Om, what if you're driving your car and somebody cuts you off and you become angry and your mind becomes disturbed, but then you use my technique, which I've mentioned here many times, for driving on the 101 freeway and someone cuts you off and doesn't use their blinker. Don't you hate that? I hate it. So somebody cuts you off and then there's that impulse that comes and it's part of your mind's reaction. Like you're indignant, like, how could that person treat me like this? Or didn't that person take driver training, or do they even have a license? So many thoughts can come up, right? But then I can short circuit the whole process by using my technique. I use it for myself. I don't say you have to use it, but I do this. When that happens, I say, I forgive you. Even if my wife's driving and somebody does it, and I notice that her mind is starting to spin, and I say, we forgive you. And then we both, okay, forget it. Let's just keep going. There's no road rage. The process becomes short-circuited by the process. I read up on Skyline Boulevard about let me speak English here. Many years ago, I read an article about a road rage incident that took place on Skyline Boulevard, where a person in a pickup truck and a person on a motorcycle got in an altercation. And the result was that out of a sense of anger, the person in the pickup truck jerked the wheel of his truck and it bumped the motorcyclist who went off the road, and unfortunately he died in the accident. And the usually mild-mannered truck driver who had a family, a job, a clean record throughout his whole life, was charged with vehicular manslaughter and had to go to jail. And in one instance, because of the impulse of the mind, he was derailed. And what if he had used his tongue to say, I forgive you, and had overridden the mind? I'll give you another example, and that's something we're going to go into in a few minutes. The idea of mantra. Mantra is a well-known word. It comes, I'm looking at my dictionary right now. Originally, it comes from Sanskrit. Man means mind, to think. And tra means that which delivers. So what is that raises the mind to a new level of awareness? It's something that you say. So there are ways, and I agree with what you said. It does start in the mind, but there's also a way, if you train your tongue to then say something that will elevate the condition of the mind, you can rise above it. And that's exactly what mantra means. Man means mind, and tra comes from the word trayate in Sanskrit, which means to deliver. You can rise above the passions or the currents of your mind, or what's called by the Yoga Sutras the vrittis, the turnings of the mind that can push us in various directions. You can rise above it by saying the right thing. There you go, JM, a long answer to a short question. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, onward. I'm going to show a couple more slides and then let's have a discussion. JM, you were going to say something? You were going to show a slide. Here we go. Your word is your bond. I love this one. Okay, in a marriage, in fact, you have to say, I do. It's in California or any other state, there's a way in which you have to agree. You have to say it out loud for it to be legal. And the officiant has to also say, by the power vested in me, by the state of California, I now pronounce you such and such. And that has to be there. And then it has to be witnessed and signed. You said it. In Vedic weddings, there's so many things that are said. Any wedding system. And then we go to the exit row. I notice this all the time because I often sit in the exit row. Please don't take my seat. It's 21D. It's the aisle in the emergency aisle when I'm flying domestically because it has much more leg room. Don't tell anybody. And when I sit there, however, there's an obligation. You know, you have to work for the airline to sit on that seat. They come around before you take off and they say, in case of emergency, are you willing to help out? That's a big commitment, isn't it? That plane starts going down. It's like, you stay behind and help everybody. Open the door, make sure everyone gets out before you do. That's a lot to ask. So they go around and you can't just go, mm-hmm. You can't just shake your head and keep your headset on. You have to verbally say yes. They all say that. The flight attendant comes around and says, I need a verbal yes. What's the verbal yes? It's a bond. You made a bond. Then you have a verdict. This is called empowered speech. Somebody takes the trouble to go through law school. They get a good reputation as a truthful person. I hope, I guess. And then they become a judge. Then sitting behind the bench, the judge then helps to guide the legal case. And at the end, she gets to say, I sentence you to what are we going to give the person? Probation. And the person's on probation for 6 months. Or there's an award and said, you just you'll receive $1 million. She just said it. She's the judge. Now it's a fact. It's a bond. It comes into being because now if you meet somebody outside 7-Eleven, you go in to get a Slurpee. I don't know if they still have those. They did when I was a kid, Slurpees. And there's somebody standing in the doorway and that person says, you should get $1 million. Do I get $1 million? JM? No. Or if the person says, you'll have to be detained for 6 months in your own home. Doesn't happen. In the right context, empowered speech, someone who's authorized says something, it becomes a bond, and you have to live by it, right? Lee J.
We have a fifth example for you.
Okay,
with
please.
this.
Hey, Chuck,
So
good to see you.
Hi, very good to see you as well. In the context of emergency first responder, I learned a while back that you have to get verbal permission from the victim to help them. And so you have to offer to help, and if they're conscious, they have to say yes and agree to the help before you can actually provide emergency response.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that one before, and that reminded me also of signing papers before you become incapacitated that give people permission to let you go. That's a kind of speech also. Yeah. There's a bond there. We move by that in the world, by these bonds, by what we say. They hold things together. All comes from the tongue, right? Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Good point. Any other reflections so far? Remember, reflection means anything you've heard so far that's stuck in your mind. We'll take a lightning round. If you have any concept that struck you so far, either put it in the chat box or you can speak up. It's a free Zoom room. Three, two. Yeah, Vicky.
I like the idea that the power of words, utilizing the power of the tongue, can even counteract these unsavory thoughts, where somebody has a negative thought and they go to cut you off, but you say, I forgive you, and that immediately counteracts it.
Yeah. And there's a moment of cognitive dissonance when that happens too, because there's such a sense of entitlement from the when one's in a mood of anger that I deserve to become angry right now. I can really let it out on this person. But then if you've already thought it through ahead of time and realize, like, remember the guy with the pickup truck? He jerked his wheel and then his life was ruined. And then you have a mantra ready to go. It's like, I forgive you. You don't have to say it to the person. In fact, it'll probably make them angry, but you can say it out loud. And there's so many ways that you can prepare ahead of time to say the right thing and then change the course of the relationship. Or if you just let yourself go and go by impulse, you can say something that you can never take back. Sheila.
Hi, it's been a while that I've been here, but I
Great
think
to see
I've
you
shared.
back. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I think I shared before. My mom is Navajo, and one of our teachings in the Navajo way is our words are so powerful that that's just a reminder for me that I have to watch what I say. And just today, I'm helping my brother with the process of closing on a home. And I could see that he was getting really agitated because he has no idea about ever doing this. And I told him, let's just take a deep breath. And just saying that to him, and I did it, and I didn't think he was going to do it. He did it. It was like reluctantly that he did it, but I could see like it changed his, like, what was going on. So every time I come in to these Zoom calls, I always get a reminder of the traditional teachings on my mom's side is our words are so powerful that even when we greet each other, we say Ya'at A, and that means it is good. It is good. We're seeing each other. It is good. And so that just all came to me. So I just wanted to share that with.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it goes to the point of these are universal principles. They work everywhere in any section of human society. Of course, even if you talk nicely to animals, they appreciate it as well, especially the mood in which you say it. It's not that they can't understand speech. but it's definitely a human superpower to be able to control speech and then change the environment. We talked last week about the Japanese phrase when you sit down to eat, when they say itadakimasu, now we're receiving. You remember, this is something that's coming as a gift, and it really changes the context. Thanks, Sheila. That was so helpful, and glad to see you back. Okay, we have Radha.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my father a few days ago shared not a story, actually incident that in a school which is run by one very saintly person, and there was some criticism being openly done in the open meeting which was being held in the village. And when he was being criticized, when the criticism was over, then he took the mic. He said, "Do you want to add more to my criticism?" And that guy who was criticizing him, he said, "This is the only one quality which is keeping us, you two, all the time lead this school. You never get agitated. My father was like, that's so special about him. Even being criticized, he said, "You want more to add to me? Please add." The whole premise has changed.
Yes, such a good point. And that goes to one of the mantras that we've talked about here that I got from a radio interview on NPR when I heard the interviewer had stopped the person who was talking. The person was from Oklahoma and referred to himself as an Okie. And then the interviewer said, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't say Okie. Maybe I will be taken the wrong way." He said, "Well, I am an Okie." And then he stopped himself and said, "No," he said, "I live to be corrected." I pulled over the car and I wrote it down in my notebook. And I said, that's my mantra. In fact, anywhere I've brought that up, people often, I gave a class in a large assembly in India, and one of the people who was a manager there raised his hand and said, "Yeah, I've had the wrong mantra." He said, "My mantra was, I live to correct everybody else." So yeah, having that on and it also, when somebody speaks, we can understand the level of their consciousness. There's an old saying, he had nothing to say, and then he said it. Rick, yes, please go ahead.
I liked your idea about taking a moment and maybe not saying what comes first into your mind. This very week, I was in the second session of a workout class, and I didn't much like the teacher. And she was sarcastic with me. I was laying on my mat. I didn't do what she wanted me to do, and so she was sarcastic. And I said to her, so the whole class could hear, "Wait a minute, don't give me any crap or I'm not coming back." And I was very animated in my thing. And so after the class was over, she came over and we were talking about it. And as she described what was going on, she said, "We get older and we lose some of our skills." And she got all teary and she started to leave. And I said, "Wait a minute, stay and talk to me. What's going on?" And then she said, "My husband died on Saturday." And I felt like such an asshole. I mean, I thought I was all full of self-righteous anger because she had humiliated me in front of the other people in the class, and so I was perfectly justified. And yet, if I had only known what had happened to her, of course I never would have said that, and I would have just moved on as you recommend. I hugged her. She went on crying, and I said, "Can I take you to lunch?" And she said no, she had another class, and she walked out alone. And it just stuck with me.
Such a good point, and it's one of the ways that I remember that in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Stephen Covey gives a similar context-changing incident in his life in which he was on a train, and a father with a couple of kids got on, and the kids were unruly to the point that everyone was being disturbed. And he leaned over to the father and said, "You're disturbing a lot of people. Could you please, control the kids?" And, he felt a little disturbed by it. And then the father said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and kind of came out of the trance that he was in and said, "Their mother just died. And, I'm really at a loss of what to do. And they're also at a loss, and that's why they're unruly and so forth. And then he mentioned just what you said. It changed the context and the relationship, and then he suddenly thought, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I should have, I would have thought of that. Yeah,
After that happened, I thought of that very story, but I didn't remember where it came from.
right.
I'd heard that story about the man on the train, but it's
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
It fits. It fits.
Yeah, it does. And it's part of the discussion of, and the way Stephen Covey brings it up is think of it ahead of time. Try to change contexts when you're in those situations and imagine. And that's what I always talk about with road rage. Like, say somebody cuts you off. One of the ways in which we become enraged is because it's such an impersonal environment. We don't know who's in the other car. We don't know what they're going through. We also don't know what their intention was. Imagine then all of a sudden, if you looked, you were about to utter some imprecation, and then you looked and it was your mother driving the other car or a friend of yours, and then you'd suddenly the context change, and then you'd suddenly change the way you were going to react. So if you look at the world like that, and that's one of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, so try to realize we're all in the same boat and have this sense of empathy for other people. Everyone has ups and downs. Everyone goes through things. Okay, let's go back to your word is your bond, because there's one more slide. There's one more point there, number 4, that I'd like to bring up. And that is that when you say, I'm going to help you, to a person in need, this is one bond. A friend of mine told me, I said, a lot of people come to me with problems. They say, what about this? What about that? He said, well, the first thing is, don't immediately say, I'm going to help you, because as soon as you do, you have a lifelong obligation to help that person. He said, the first thing I say when someone says I have a problem is I answer with a question. I say, well, how would you plan to deal with it? Because just realize, if you say, okay, I'll help you out, you have to be good for that. You have to be ready for that. So these are just examples of how powerful our word is. One sentence, one word that we utter, because we're humans, we have a responsibility, and that gets expressed, and we're bound to it when we say something. So the next one, just as a reminder, once we say something, they can only be forgiven, not forgotten. I mean, if you say something to someone that is out of anger, in fact, my friend Vraj, who was he worked professionally as a mediator for many years. He worked for the government, and he's an expert at mediation and conflict resolution. So in one of his talks he gave, he showed this graph, which I keep in my mind all the time, and that is there's an inverse relationship between emotion and reason. And the more emotional I become, the less reasonable I am. And oftentimes when we feel this kind of emotional upsurge, and then we just say something, or it could be we write something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone sends you an email and then you think, oh, how could they say such a thing to me? And then you start writing a response. In the old days, when we used to have letters and no email, it would take you to the next day to get it mailed out. And perhaps by the next day, you'd reread it and say, no, I don't think so. Nowadays, it's so instant. You push the button and then, uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that. When you cool down in a half hour, you might think, oh, maybe that was too much. And generally, if you are emotional when you write it, it's probably too much. And if you're emotional when you say it, it's probably too much. And the best you can get after that is to be forgiven. It won't be forgotten. So don't send it out. Like Rick was saying, be careful what you say before you say it, because you push the send button, it's out there. And it could be somebody very close to you say it to, and it's like, yeah, I remember you said that. Okay, so this is an admonition that words are free. It's how you use them that makes them, should be an M there, makes them valuable or not. So everyone can say something, and going back to that idea of he had nothing to say and then he said it. oftentimes we'll say something just as a filler. But when we have an idea how valuable the words are, apparently they're free, but if we use them properly, then we can build empires, we can build relationships, we can talk people out of doing something harmful and so forth. So next is we're getting a little more metaphysical, philosophical, but there's a sense in some of quantum physics that everything's a vibration. Everything's held together by vibration. And going back to the example I gave earlier of building a house, it starts with vibration. So in all the ologies, the sense of logos, that there's an organized system in our body. We have organs. There are organized systems throughout the universe. And these are, according to the ancient wisdom literatures, held together by sound vibration. Everything starts from sound. Could you remember that idea? So according to that theory, then the wisdom literatures go a step further and they say, what you say will either bind or entangle you or liberate and enlighten you. Our speech is so powerful that it will, it helps to develop our consciousness. And the phrase in Sanskrit, which comes from a very ancient literature called the Vedanta Sutra, is anavriti shabdat. Shabdat means the sound vibration. Anavriti means to uncover something. So it says that by sound, you can free your consciousness. You can uncover your consciousness from various layers of contamination. Radha.
I just wanted to add to the point you mentioned about instant communication. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a situation where I was kind of blamed that I didn't make the right communication. So then I was working on it. I thought, what can I do? But I had all the facts with me. So what I did, I made a draft and put it in a draft, the whole communication, to make sure I proved that I'm right. But somehow I didn't send it. Somehow, because I think maybe some of these impressions in your mind, I kept it. Today, I was somehow looking at that when it happened 2 months ago, because I would have sent even this communication. The other party would have known they were wrong, but now there's a proof they will not wrong. That will stick go further deeper in their head. So it's better to avoid it. So I was so happy today it happened, and somehow I was looking my draft folder. I found that message like long written, but I didn't send it. So I'm so glad. So thank you for your teachings. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's amazing how much trouble we can save ourselves by not doing something, by not saying something and just letting it go. In fact, there's one of the formulas that I like to live by is speak 30% less than you think you need to say in a day. And there's a way that there's a natural filter that, oh, should I say this or not say it? Some things are just whimsical or just for wasting time. And once you bring them up, then you start a whole cycle. Lijay.
Hare Krishna, Vaisheshika Prabhu. I wonder whether you have some advice for people who tend to speak less than. So I think that's speaking for myself. I usually wish I could have said this, but I tend to be on the other extreme of the spectrum. So do you have some advice for people like this?
Well, I usually notice for myself that it has a lot to do with context. I do admire people who are more selective in what they say. I have a friend who I've done work with, and I notice in meetings that he doesn't volunteer for a lot of things, and he waits till the end to give his verdict. I have a tendency to do the opposite. Anything I hear, I say, "Oh yeah, I can fix that. Let me talk about it." One of the points that is made in the wisdom literatures that I keep referring to is that context is important. When you're around those that you can trust, you have a group where you feel that you have other people's confidence, then you may feel much more free to talk. And everyone's different. really it has a lot to do with personality. And so it's not necessarily the quantity of what you say, but it's the quality that counts. And timing has a lot to do with it also. So it's not good or bad, say more, say less. It's really about the quality of it and what your intention is. And I'll go into that in just a minute. KJM, thanks, Lee J. I'll try to expand on that as I'm thinking of it. The next slide talks about words as seeds. It's another metaphor, but these metaphors can be very helpful. Words are seeds we plant in our hearts and minds. What kind of garden are you planting? So whatever we're saying ourselves and to those that we're working with, you can think of it. I just planted a seed. Every seed has an effect. And then, of course, there's the idea of the sacred word or phrase. It's a pretty universal idea. Every culture has some sense of mantra or saying something that is transcendental. And one of the definitions I found on an online dictionary about the word mantra, which is it's a phrase when repeated that brings transformation. And I did talk about mantra earlier. Man means mind and tra means to deliver. Now, sound carries consciousness. I remember my mother saying to me sometimes, I don't like your tone of voice. Did anybody's mother ever say that to them? You maybe said the right thing, but said, I didn't like your tone. But I said yes, but I didn't like the way you said yes. How does she know that, that I had the wrong consciousness when I said yes? Because sound carries consciousness. We're so perceptive, we're so subtle human beings that when someone says something in a particular way with a particular tone, we can understand their state of mind. It comes out in their words. It comes out in the way they say their words. And therefore, I say categorically, it can be challenged, but I would say sound carries consciousness. And that brings us to the next idea, which is you are what you speak. The kinds of things we say manifest our external environment, but we can judge a person by what he or she says. And the next is about village talk. This is something that's meant to be avoided, according to Rupa Goswami, one of the teachers of this philosophy of speech. He says village talk means gossip. It's saying things about people behind their backs, and it leads to a weakness in the community, in relationships, and within one's own heart to criticize others. You lose trust, and then you'll feel other people might be talking about me behind their back. It's a kind of pernicious speech. It's speech that drags us down. Then he, in the teachings of speech, yoga of the tongue, there is, interestingly, these two symptoms. Anybody can fake anything and say, I'm a very elevated spiritual person. But one of the wise philosophers of antiquity named Madhvacharya said, there's only two ways by which you can judge a person's character. One is by their steadiness in the practice, because you can't fake steadiness. You either show up or you don't. And the second one is that what comes out of their mouth. And so he called that mukhya prasada. Mukhya means mouth, and prasada means something that's meant for the benefit of others. It's meant to do good. Even if you're giving criticism, if your heart's in the right place, you're actually trying to help somebody, it has a different effect because sound carries consciousness. And then there's this way of manifestation that is well known, but it comes up in this context that we have thoughts. That's the one on the very left that talks about our energy centers within the body, sometimes known as chakras. And then from thought, we create words. I mentioned that in the very beginning in our meditation. From our words, something starts to move. There's action. That our movement generally solidifies into a set of habits. And their habits form our character, and our character forms our future. Now we have a few minutes for final reflections. What are you taking away from this one sentence concept idea that you heard so throughout the presentation, that when you get off this call, someone in your office grabs you by the arm and said, what was that guy talking about in there? What's the one thing you'll say? Or if you say later on, you get together with someone and say, yeah, I was on a Zoom call today. Guy was talking about yoga of the tongue. Say, yoga of the tongue was downward dog. What is that? Then what are you going to say? What's the one thing you're taking away from this discussion we had today that you think was notable, that you think you could use, that you're taking away in your pocket? Shankari.
Sound carries consciousness.
And why did you pick that?
It makes so much sense because we can use the words, but really, that, as you said, the tone of it, we can. It just comes out. It just comes out. We can tell. I know somebody just told me, oh, you make such a lovely this. Why don't you go make it? But I could understand that they just want me to do it. They are praising me so that I can just go and do it, but they were not really praising me. So it was so apparent in the tone in which they said. So
yeah, sometimes we say their heart wasn't into it. And what does that mean, really? If you think about it, their heart wasn't into it, there's something intangible that we get from other people. And then when they speak, we can sometimes understand what was really in their heart when they said it. The syntax was right, but the feeling was wrong. We've picked up on their consciousness. Thanks, Shankari. Okay, let's have a few more. JM, some came in the chat, maybe?
Yeah. Sundar says, same, sound carries consciousness. He also reiterates and he says, try not to react when your emotions are high and rationale is down.
Oh, yeah. That's such valuable information I got from my friend. In fact, he showed a chart and I remember it. Anytime there's a surge of emotion, I remember, I don't know what I'm doing right now. It's like an intoxicated person doesn't know what he or she is doing, right? And the next day they go, hey, you ran over a mailbox. And you're like, I did? I don't remember. And that surge in our bloodstream of anger or guilt or whatever it may be, some kind of human emotion, makes us irrational. And we can't think straight. And the next day, someone will say, you know what you did? You just ruined your relationship. So that's an important inverse relationship to keep in mind. In fact, we can get a tattoo of that. If you're going to get a tattoo today, make that your tattoo, put it on your arm. What else do we have here, JM?
There are a couple of them on Facebook. Chandrika says, word is bond. And Nutan says, words create vibrations. Tone of voice, shape, response.
Yeah, that's something we all know, right? Thanks, Newton. And who else was it, Chandrika?
Chandrika, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for checking in on Facebook. And let's see what else we have here on
Vicky, on the chat, we have Vicky who says, words are free. It's how we use them which determines their value. And Mayank says, tongue is the gateway sense. And
yeah, I think that one about words are free. The idea is choose your words wisely. And whether you speak a lot or you speak a little, just make sure you have something that's worth saying. And that's one of the ways to filter it out, right? And what else?
Mayank said, tongue is the gateway sense.
Means it always leads to something. There's nothing inconsequential that we say. And also, if we concentrate on controlling the tongue, being careful, everything else will fall into place. That's what the gateway idea means. And finally?
And then Kathy says, run the test for only speak words that are beneficial for others.
Yes, and that doesn't preclude giving criticism. You can criticize someone. Being critical means being discriminatory. You look and if you're a mentor type, if you're a teacher and someone signed up for your instruction, you have to give some kind of critical advice, but just make sure you're doing it for the right reason, because sound carries consciousness. If you're trying to usurp their position or you're trying to undermine them or something, that will come out in your words. Make sure that your intention is right. And that's the state of the heart of a highly thoughtful person, is that he or she's heart is in the right place. So when the words come out, they're beneficial. They help others. Constructive criticism. Thanks, Yan Yan. Well, everybody, we've come to the end of an hour. It went by for me just in a few moments because I was so engaged because of your attention that you gave today, and I'm really grateful for all of you joining. Thank you very much, Rick, for coming on too. It's great to see you. And there's a way when I've passed through the Himalayas recently, I reconfirmed there's a tradition they have there. The yogis who live high in the mountains and come out of their caves from time to time to find tubers and things like that to bring back in, have a way of saying goodbye to one another or greeting each other. It's the same thing. It's kind of like in Hawaii, they have aloha. It's hello and goodbye. And they say there, Haribol, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. And they have the traditional way of doing, they put their arms up like a Haribol. See everybody later, Haribol.
Haribol!
Thank you.
Haribol.
See you next
Haribol.
time.
Thank
I'm
you.
going on a little trip. I have to head out. The Success Sadhana will continue. I will be in a different time zone on the other side of the earth for just a little while. And I'll be coming back here as soon as possible. But I have to say, I'll be missing you all while I'm away. It's one of the ways that I hate travel I like travel, but the part I don't like is missing all of you. See you soon.